I guess I'll just introduce myself really quickly, and then we'll talk about what we're going to be going over here and what we're trying to accomplish tonight. So anyway, you know I'm TJ Nicolaides. You can find me on Twitter at TJ Nicolaides. I work at Think Brownstone as a developer. Previously worked at LabRetriever, which is a cloud startup in Norristown that does medical record software for sleep labs. Actually helps to store the waveforms that you get when you're doing a sleep test in the office, and also helps schedule patients and all that good stuff. So my interest in Gulp and my interest in front-end tools in general kind of has to do with my experience at LabRetriever, kind of being in charge of the front-end assets and trying to make the application as quick and snappy as possible. So we actually used Grunt at LabRetriever, but like halfway through was when everybody kind of started shifting away from Grunt and into Gulp, and we'll talk a little bit about. It's just a small part of the talk that we'll be kind of going over the difference between the two, but we're going to focus on Gulp over all the others today. So Gulp.js, what is it? It is a command line task runner. It's built with Node.js, so it's all in JavaScript. And it enjoys kind of a rich community of plugins. We're going to be having a look at a handful today that handle things like Sass, JavaScript, optimizing images, in your browser, basically all the things you like to do with Grunt, all the things you like to do with CodeKit if you used CodeKit before, as we did previously at LabRetriever before we switched to Grunt. Gulp will do for you. And so it's just something that will automatically manage all your front-end assets for you. Okay? For those of you who were like me a couple of years ago and just kind of putting your development code up on production without a thought as to how it was being used or its effect on your app or site's performance, why use a build tool? You can write less or Sass anywhere Node runs. That's what it comes down to with Gulp.js. So on your development machine, on your staging environment, on your production environment, you can commit your Sass files or your uncompiled less or Sass files, and know that the build kit, the task runner, is going to be compiling the same CSS you're getting on your development machine as you are in any other environment where your site or your application is running. You get to watch your directories to compress and concatenate JavaScript and CSS. We'll be doing that tonight. Run tests and do all kinds of other things too. You get to customize your project's development workflow. I found this to be more true than any other build tool I've used because you're writing JavaScript. And really, the whole thing about using a build tool in general is to let Gulp or whatever your build tool is do all the Charlie work. If anybody's ever seen Always Sunny in Philadelphia, you know that Charlie is the one who takes care of all the disgusting work at Patty's Pub that nobody else wants to do, and they all take it for granted that Charlie is, cleaning up all the rats and cleaning the bathrooms and all that horrible blood, urine type stuff. That's Charlie work, and that's what we're going to be letting Gulp do.
Thank you for the Philadelphia reference there.
It's front-end Philly. I can't. I try and work Charlie into all of my keynotes. It's worked pretty well so far. So why not Grunt? If anybody has, if you're in this talk, you are interested in getting started with one of these tools, maybe you're already using one of these tools and you're looking to make the switch, why not Grunt? In my experience, just talking from my experience here, I am a Gulp beginner, but here's what I like about it over, the other command line tool, the other kind of prevalent command line tool that does these types of things. Gulp favors code over configuration, and I don't have an example to share with you tonight about this, but in writing Grunt, tasks, I found that it's a lot more like writing a configuration object when you're writing like a JavaScript application than it is about writing the actual application itself. So everything has to be, structured just so in order for the grunt task to, pick up and do what you're asking it to do. And if it's configured incorrectly or you're missing a setting somewhere, it's not immediately apparent what might be wrong. I think that when you're writing a JavaScript function and it's just going line 1, 2, 3, 4 and going through the motions like any other JavaScript application, I think it makes a whole lot more sense. So, JavaScript functions instead of nesting configuration objects is a huge plus for me. The other big deal thing is Gulp runs concurrent tasks out of the box. And what that means is you don't want to have to wait for Gulp to finish compiling your Sass before it gets to work on something kind of unrelated, which might be, linting and minifying your JavaScript. They can run in parallel. And Grunt just doesn't do it out of the box. Gulp does. And then there's just an easier generic API for writing plugins. If you want to write a Grunt task or a Gulp task, I've seen people write some impressive things, really custom to their project. You're just writing Node.js, and that's what it comes down to. Is just easier to dive in there and write your own, custom tasks to match what is going on with maybe an existing project that's kind of complex. Okay. So what we're going to be doing tonight is running through sample installation, and I'll show you what we have here, and that is just a sample Bootstrap project. All right, we're using Bootstrap Sass. We're importing it here into main.scss. Here's our directory structure. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of some of these remnants here. Okay, so we've got our CSS, we've got our Bootstrap fonts, we've got our JavaScript here, and this is kind of assuming, and I think it's a pretty safe assumption because I've seen on your past shows list you guys are already into Sass, so I think you're coming into this with kind of a basic understanding of what Sass can do for you.
No doubt. No doubt.
Absolutely. So. You should make great sense to you that we're just importing the entire Bootstrap library into here, and so that when we output that, we get the entire library plus our own styles in main.css. And so here's what that looks like. That's not what that is. This is what it is. So if you guys can see that, we got a kind of a boilerplate Bootstrap page. Nothing fancy about it. We got a hero. We got a couple sections here. And so we're going to get to work kind of installing Gulp from nothing on this Mac and maybe writing our first task. Okay. So, like I said, Gulp is just Node, so we're going to be using Node Package Manager, NPM, to go ahead and install it. And you can use the global flag to install it across the entire machine, or you can do it within just the directory that you're using without that global flag. So I'm in the wrong directory here. I'm going to come out here to site/Gulp project. And hopefully everybody can see this all right. I'm going to go npm install global Gulp. And npm is going to help us out with all kinds of stuff here, including installing all the plugins that we want to use tonight. So Gulp is installed, which is great, but we need to come into the root of our project here and do two things. And by the way, I saw that you guys already had your hands on the GitHub repo that I used to kind of create this project. So that all is going to be available. We'll link it in the chat room at the end of the show and everything like that.
Cool. Thanks again for reminding everybody.
Yeah.
Is there a configuration file that calls all these dependencies that you have listed?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, are you talking about what is in this view here?
Yeah, on the view there.
No, npm install global Gulp. I think how that is handled is the Gulp project has its own configuration file, and so when npm, the package manager, goes to install Gulp, it's set, Gulp has that package.json file, which we're going to be creating for our own project, that says, please also bring these dependencies down. Okay.
Very cool.
Everything you're seeing here, it's reaching out to Gulp on npm, and Gulp is telling it bring this stuff in automatically.
Cool. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's cool. Anybody has a question or something, actually, I'm not really even sure how to interact with folks who are watching. I got the chat window open here, but
yeah, I'll monitor the chat if anything comes through.
yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea. So anyway, we need 2 files to get started. First, one called gulpfile.js, and in that we're just going to leave that empty for a moment while we create our other file here. The other file is called package.json. So I'm going to open both of those up. So package. Here's what we want to have happen in here. Okay, this is kind of what Gulp coming from npm has, and this is that area where you declare dependencies. So if you are, running npm install or something like that, this is where a app says, please also bring these things that I'm depending on down with you. All right, so this is the type of thing where you're going to copy from another existing project and customize it to meet your own project's needs here. I'm telling it to look for gulpfile.js. I'm going to go ahead and save this. This is key here, this dev dependencies. We'll see how this changes as we install plugins, but we don't have one yet. We are just going to go ahead and go into our Gulp file and create our first default task. Okay? So every dependency, and Gulp is the obvious first dependency that we need to run anything. We bring in a variable, and using the require function here, using the name of the plugin or the dependency as the argument, the sole argument. So we're requiring Gulp, and then we have gulp.task to be able to use. We're going to name the task default, and then the second argument to task is this anonymous function where we're just going to console out hello world. Okay? And so then that allows us to, at the root, we're in the root of our document here in sites/gulp project. I can just run gulp, and it will say hello world and finish up. So, obviously not very useful, but that's a big step in any project, having that hello world happen. And that's really all it takes, is having that package.json and this Gulp file with this little bit in here for you to be able to begin using Gulp and starting to write your own tasks. Okay, that's what that looks like. But, we want to set to work getting it to really do some useful stuff for us, okay? So, I'm already using Sass here to compile scss/main.scss to css/main.css, okay? So that's already taken place, but what I would like to do is have Gulp do that for me. So the first thing we're going to do is install our first plugin, and the way we do that is very similar to how we installed Gulp. We're going to use npm install, and we're going to use the save dev flag. I'll show you what that does in a minute, and then the name of the plugin. Okay, plugin in this case is Gulp Ruby Sass. So npm install, save dev, Gulp Ruby Sass. Okay. So this is going to think. It's going to reach out to Node Package Manager. You see it's also bringing in its own set of dependencies here. But this is available for us to bring into our Gulp file now in the form of a require. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to say var sass. I'm just going to call it sass require. I could call that anything I wanted, but I like to keep things simple. Gulp Ruby Sass. Okay. Now this is what our Sass function is going to look like, roughly. Let's go back to our Gulp file here. We're going to leave our default task alone for the time being. We are going to create a new task. We're going to call this one Sass. And the second argument, again, is this anonymous function that we're creating here that is returning this. If you've ever worked with jQuery before and you're familiar with the whole, $$ dot method argument dot method to, chained method system, then you're going to be kind of at home here with .pipe. Okay. Really, what we're doing is we're using .source, gulp.source, gulp.pipe, and gulp.destination. These are pretty common across a lot of the things you're going to be doing with Gulp. Basically saying, look in this directory, which is .source, pipe it through this function, in this case, Sass, which corresponds with this variable here. You can use on to kind of catch any errors that might pop up. That's important. And then piping it again from the Sass function through to gulp.destination. Okay, so we're going to put in the arguments that we're using successfully with Sass on the command line here. And this isn't a huge improvement for us yet, but you will see how this will make your life easier as soon as we start to add more tasks. So we're going to say, well, let's just look directly at SCSS here. We could just say that is a little bit too wide. We want it to look only at main.scss, all right? And here we're going to say dump it out into the CSS directory. Okay. So just as a proof of concept here, we're going to kind of move these puppies to the trash, all right? And I'm all saved. Let me run gulp sass. Okay, and that's going to think, and then all of a sudden we get main.css with the entire Bootstrap library here, and along with the source map file, which is going to help us debug and everything like that. Just the same way we would have done had we called Sass directly from the command line with all the arguments and everything like that. So I guess one of the things that is nice about this is, you can configure it however you want, and without having to remember all these command line arguments and everything like that. But the other things are going to come into play when we start to watch directories and everything like that. So that's Sass. We've run in our first plugin, and we are doing our first useful thing. And our CSS is still there. Hooray. All right, well, so we have Sass happening now, and that's great. Let's add a couple more things really quick. We're going to add a task to delete some files and clean out a directory. We're going to call it clean. We're going to be using the del plugin here, so I'm just going to hit clear, and we're going to run through this real quick. npm install save dev. Oh, and that's one of the things I want to say here. Save dev, the save dev flag. What is this doing? When we go into our package.json file, you'll notice that these dev dependencies that are here, that's being automatically populated in package.json by save dev. So whatever version of Gulp Ruby Sass that you downloaded at the beginning of the project that is working for your project, next time you take this project to another machine, perhaps you're deploying it to a staging environment, or you got to work on a work laptop and you can't work at home. Anytime you bring this project in, one of the first things you're going to do before you hit Gulp is just run npm install. And that is going to bring down, right here, it's kind of doesn't have anything to bring down at all, but it's going to be looking inside of dev dependencies here to bring in the things that already work with your project. So in this case, 0.71 of Gulp Ruby SAS 1.0 of the DEL. Okay, let's go back to our Gulp task file or Gulp file, and I'm going to say Gulp clean here, and this is going to give us this task again in the kind of the same format that we're used to seeing already. So these two arguments inside a task, one is the name of the task, and the second argument is like what is actually happening here. And so what we're going to say here is we'd like to just go ahead and delete everything that is inside of the CSS directory. And this is kind of a common thing too, because what this just kind of allows you to do is if you are running a SAS function or you're running a minify function and you want to clear the directory of old files before you dump the new versions in, then you can just say gulp clean. Okay. Oh, I always forget this. Don't forget to declare your dependency. Okay. Gulp clean. And there you go. So we go in there and look. It has completely zipped our CSS directory. Man, it did that to me the last time I presented, and not sure. That's a little aggressive. We won't use it again. But, I mean, proof of concept, our CSS is gone. Run gulp SAS, and it's back. Okay, so can't remember what I did differently last night when, I'm not presenting, it works fine, but I don't know what's going on with DEL here that it takes out the directory, including the files in it, and we just wanted to take care of the files. But, if you wanted to clean out your CSS directory, your JavaScript directory before you dump new files in there, delete is a module that lets you do that. Now we're going to go ahead and look at what we can do with our JavaScript assets. Okay, we're going to be using concat, rename, uglify, and order. We're going to take it one step at a time here. This is a lot to kind of consume. So really, we're just going to go, and all we want to have happen first of all is we want to concatenate all of our JavaScript. Let's look at our index.html file here. We've got a call to Modernizer, to jQuery, to the entire Bootstrap library, and then our own main.js. And so that's kind of a, not that much, but really, if you're trying to build fast websites, you are trying to cut down on the amount of return trip calls you're making to the server. So if you can deliver all of your JavaScript in one concatenated file, that's a huge boost to your page speed, and your users will be happy for it. Having to download one and cache one file instead of 4 or 5, however many JavaScript files. There's more all the time that people are, attaching to these pages and the apps out there. So if you can kind of know that you can import those files or concatenate them all using a task like this, then you can have as many JavaScript files as you want on the production end, on the development end, and on the production end you can just serve up one. So let's go ahead and I'll show you we can install a lot of these all at once. So we're going to go gulp concat, gulp rename, gulp uglify, and gulp order. Okay. So, I don't know, first of all, let's go ahead and do the concatenation. Let's build this by hand. Okay, so we're going to have, we're going to call this task minify. And here's our anonymous function. That's the second argument. So one of the first things we want to do here is return gulp source, okay? And in gulp source, you can have one argument that's a string, or what we're going to do is, show off an array. You can have an array, like, looking for several different paths. So we're going to look for JS /*///JS. Okay. So what that is let's go into our JavaScript file or our JavaScript directory here, and we're just going to be consuming everything here and recursively everything that might sit in subfolders inside of .js too. Okay, we're going to pipe it. So .pipe, gulp.pipe through what does our concat function look like? Concat, right? So we're just going to say gulp concat, and we'll call it all.js. And let's say pipe to gulp.destination.dest. All right. We'll call this JS2 here. We'll just say dump it right in the same folder. So let's see what that does first of all. Gulp minify. So what we should have here, if we refresh, is an all.js that looks like it is the sum of all of our files here. So that is what it looks like we've done here. We have Bootstrap right up here at the top. If I were to do a little search, I'm sure we'd find jQuery. That looks like it there. So that's great. It's concatenated everything for us. Okay. Let's change our index.html file because now we can kind of streamline that. And we're just going to say, yeah, grab all.js. Okay. I know Modernizer is probably supposed to be up at the top in the head. I'm not going to put it there for the purpose of this project. Let's just go ahead and go and refresh our project. Okay. Okay. So in terms of what we're downloading here, we are indeed downloading one JavaScript file, but there's a problem you can see. There's this something called error. Bootstrap's JavaScript requires jQuery. Well, we have jQuery we saw it inside of our all.js, but a whole lot like how we had index.html structured here, jQuery came first before the script call to Bootstrap. So the next thing I think we're going to do is we need to use order. This was something I wasn't doing before. I didn't have a need to do it because I didn't run into an issue. And then for the purposes of this demonstration, I saw that issue and I was like, oh, that's good to know. Okay. So we're going to pipe it through order. And that's what this looks like. Right? Order. And order is taking two arguments here. Okay? It's taking an array of files that can be as long as you want, and then this base argument. So I'm just going to put in the empty array right now, and then this comma base argument. And I cannot remember why that's in there. Just trust me that I had to put it in there for a good reason. Okay. So what we want to tell it here is go in order according to how this array is arranged. Okay. So first of all, we want it to grab jQuery before any other file. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. Okay. All right, we'll put that in there, and then we can go in and use our original wildcard, path here to say anything else in any other order from the JavaScript folder is fine. You might need to introduce, like your project, you might have several of these that you need to install here, but we only have the one. jQuery needs to go first. Everything else can come after that. Okay. So now at this point, we got a task that we're hot stuff here, okay? We're using concatenation and order in the same task. So I'm going to this time write gulp minify. It's done, and now, oh, come on. Let me go through the rest of minify really quick. I am just going to copy and paste the rest of what we have here because I think the important stuff we have already. So we are piping in things in a certain order after we've grabbed it with SRC here, the gulp.source. We're using concatenate to concatenate it into all.js, and then we're piping that into the JS directory. The other things that I have here are uglify, which is just going to minify that thing, that is, that blob of data that is working its way through pipe, and we're going to also rename it to all.min.js, okay? So we're going to have two separate files at that point, all.js, which is the uncompressed version, and all.min.js. We're also going to separate things into a source and dist file, okay? So that's how this is going to work here. We're using destination twice in the same task. We're going to change this to /src. And same thing here and here. And at that point, then we get to have a couple things happening. Whoops. I think you'll see pretty quickly the benefit to this. We're going to dump everything in there. Going to get rid of these really quick. And so at this point in time, we run gulp minify. Rename is not out. You got to declare your dependencies, guys. Var rename equals require gulp rename. Okay, so now the nice thing about this is all of our source files, our uncompressed source files that we want to appear in all.js are isolated in a source directory, so you know what to edit and you know what to leave alone. This belongs to your production build and all.min.js. You can see we have quite a little bit of savings for it being a text file, 172K, and we open that up. And this is what uglify has done to it. Okay, jQuery looks the same, but all the rest of the scripts that we have in here are, also minified, and we're saving space there. So that is our big omnibus minify task here. I'm going to try and go through the rest of this because I know I want to be mindful of people's time, and I know we started a little bit late and everything. There's a couple other things we can do with JavaScript. We can lint our JavaScript. So again, we're going to be looking in the same directory as before for our JavaScript to lint, and we're going to install. And while we're doing that, we will do that. And so then we can go ahead and say gulp lint. Okay? One of the problems that I discovered with this is it's nice that this takes an array of file paths, but unless we find a really good one to put in here, it is going to be, linting every single file in our source folder, and we don't want that. So what I found is you can use exclamation points to negate certain folders. So exclamation point, /js/source/vendor. Okay. and that means that we can run gulp lint, and it's only going to be linting main.js. So I'm going to do something to cause an error intentionally here, and we'll have gulp lint, and it will complain about line 1, column 27 here, and main.js, and it's going to ignore all of the other, linting problems that you might be okay with a, library doing, but you want to make sure your own code is good and up to snuff and all that stuff. Okay, so that's a linting task. We are going to just go ahead and skip over optimizing images because it just kind of follows the same kind of pattern and everything like that. The thing to notice here is that you can kind of use these curly braces to declare JPEG and PNG files only as part of the wildcard, so you don't need to declare the same path twice if you're looking for two different file names, and you're just using Smush It here. So this is pretty familiar. You guys should be able to, put that together. But just trust me when I say that you can put that in there and have a watch an image directory, and then every time you upload an image or change an image, it's going to run Yahoo's great Smush It engine to optimize that image and get it ready. So I mean, images count for so much against your page speed. When users are downloading all your assets, there's no real way around them downloading all those images, so they might as well be as slim as possible. And so Smush is great for that, and Gulp will do that automatically for you. Let's talk about watching directories, because that is kind of the thing that I can't do without when I have one of these tools. Okay, and Gulp has that built in. So we're going to go ahead and change the default directory here, or the default task rather, to take an extra argument, which is that array. So we can be telling it run sass when we say default, and we can also put in some of these gulp.watch puppies. Okay, gulp.watch. And this is going to take two arguments. One is the directory that you want to be watching. Okay? And in this case, let's watch the CSS directory so we can run the sass task. The second argument is just an array of other tasks that you want to run. So we've already defined sass here. We want sass to run when it detects a change in the CSS / directory / any subdirectory. So, that means anytime you might modify like the bootstrap sass files for whatever reason, or anything, if you have a nested structure to your sass directory, it'll do that. So why don't we go ahead and say I'm just going to run gulp, because gulp is the same as saying gulp default. You can see it's writing with Ruby sass, and now it hasn't finished here. It's just kind of still sitting here waiting for us to do stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and say Jumbotron color, and I'm going to pick something good. Right? So you can see now, as soon as we hit save there, it has fired the sass task for us again, automatically. All right? And we go back over to Gulp project, and now our Jumbotron text color is red. Oh, it's missing all.js. We're going to go ahead and fix that. All right, so that is like one thing you could be doing with that directory watching. That is another thing we can be doing. We want to watch the JS directory so that anytime we change anything in the source directory of JS, it will automatically lint and minify everything in there for us. Okay, so we're going to set Control-C here to stop that gulp task, because it's ongoing this time. It doesn't finish. It just kind of waits indefinitely for something to happen or an error to happen. We're going to go ahead and watch, and again, first argument is js/src/, and this time we can declare this is an array, so we can put multiple tasks in there. We're going to have it run lint and minify. Okay, So let's run Gulp again. And so this time, if we pop open main.js and say, hello, Billy front end group. Okay, you can see it's running lint, it's running minify for us. And if I come over here and refresh the page, there you go. So that's an example of a couple things here. This watch directory here, and also, being able to group these tasks together. An example of something where you might have group tasks all together is this build task, which we're not going to run here because we already know clean is not working. But if you wanted to bring your entire project up without having to commit the minified JavaScript or the compiled CSS, you just want the source files to go up and know that when you're deploying to your staging environment or your production environment, you can run npm install, it's going to bring in all the plugins, and then you can run gulp build. Build will fire the clean, it's going to clean out your directories, it's going to compile your sash for you, your smush, your lint, and your minify, and it's going to take all of your source files in terms of Sass and uncompressed JavaScript and generate the compressed, optimized versions of those files, the production-ready versions of those files, just by you running gulp build. And that's something you can actually, if you're using Jenkins for continuous integration or whatever, you can have it run automatically. It'll watch the entire directory. What I like to do is when I push to GitHub, have a post-commit webhook that will fire something like gulp build on the remote server, so that every time I push up a commit, it is running gulp for me. Not only on my development machine, but my staging and my staging and production. It's pretty great. I'm going to comment this out because we're not actually going to use it. It's going to complain. Okay, so that's grouping tasks. The last thing I want to show tonight is browser sync, especially those of you who might be familiar with CodeKit or applications like that. You're used to this business here where you can tell it, watch these directories and fire Sass or less, or compress my JavaScript. But you're also probably used to that auto refresh happening in the browser. And sometimes there's a partial refresh where it just kind of injects the new version of a CSS style sheet for you. So that's what browser sync is going to do for us. That's what this task looked like. We're going to cancel our running gulp task and clear again here. We have to install the plugin, and that is called browser sync. It is odd because it doesn't have gulp at the beginning, and that's because it plays with a lot of other systems, not just gulp. So that's installing. We're going to add two new dependencies up here, and that is browser sync, and then we're also going to reference, we're going to have a reload variable that is just browser sync .reload. So this is just an alias for that, really. Okay. Here's what this is doing right here. It's a little bit different from some of these other ones where we're returning gulp.source, minify, and all that stuff. Browser sync, you fire it from inside other tasks. We're going to put it in with our Sass task and our minify task. The first thing it has to do is actually kind of establish a connection with your project, and I like to use these .dev virtual hosts on my machine, so anytime I put in a directory called Gulp project, and if anybody wants the link to how to do this, I think it's pretty neat setup, and it's worked pretty well for me in terms of rapidly setting up projects. It sets up a .dev domain for me automatically, and so we're going to proxy Gulp project.dev with browser sync. It's going to open it up on its own. Let's see what that looks like just by firing this on its own. Gulp browser sync. Okay, And so you see our project here, and you see that it's being brought in on port 3000. Okay, that's important because then that gives your command line, running task here, which is very similar to that watch function that was happening before. The ability to connect with the project and inject styles on its own. You can see it's this browser sync client that is in there that we don't have in our index.html. That's being injected because it's coming across here as proxy on port 3000. So let's actually see how to go ahead and start using this. Okay, let's X out of this. And first thing we want to do is open up our SAS task. Let's shut up our lint task and our default task. We're not using them right at the minute, so we can just kind of focus on SAS. Okay. What we want to do here is .pipe and do one more thing after .destination is finished here, and that is reload. All right, and that corresponds with this variable right here. And we are going to give it one argument, and that is to stream true. So now, let's fire up Gulp Browser Sync again. Let's do something fun like change the background of the Jumbotron. And here's where it might make a liar out of me. I don't know. Maybe something's wrong with my CSS. I think I'm doing something wrong. Here's what I think I'm doing wrong. I think I need to run browser sync here. And see, there we go. Okay. I don't think I have the image in there. I don't think I do. Maybe that's why I was screwing up. Yeah, it's a 404. I don't actually have an Earth image. I lied. Let's pick a better color, just on its own. There you go. That's hideous. Okay. Pop. So you can get this connected to browser sync widget in the upper left-hand corner, and it lets you know that it's watching. And that's nice because it did that without a full page reload, which it is capable of doing. We'll do that in a second for our JavaScript because you can't really inject new versions of the same JavaScript file the way that you can inject a new CSS file over top of the other one. So that's nice, and that allows you to rapidly, like this is my workflow. What you're looking at right here is where I will go into my code editor. I will change, color to, let's pick like light blue or something like that. I'll change that, and I'll come over here, and it will, sometimes before I even come back over to this space to look at my browser, it will have reloaded on its own. So I don't have to sit there and wait for a full page reload in order to see the result of the change that I made in my SAS file. And it's that instantaneous feedback that you get that is really crucial to like doing your job quickly and well, and just kind of learning. Really, if you're learning something, having that instant feedback is really going to speed things up for you in a lot of different ways. Let's fire browser sync one more way, and that is here. We're going to use the reload keyword without quotes here, and we're just going to say, basically, we're going to watch our JavaScript directory, and then when we are finished linting and minifying, then we are going to reload the entire browser. This time without this stream true, argument, this option, object argument that we're putting in here, that basically tells it to inject the new style. We don't want that for JavaScript. We want to actually reload the entire thing. So I'm going to stop this. I'm going to save my gulp file. I'm going to fire gulp again. The only thing that's a pain in the ass for me here is that it opens up a completely new tab on its own here, even though I already had it open here. So I got to open up DevTools again, whatever. That's okay. And let's make a change to main.js. So I'll hit save here. It's minifying, it's linting, and it's reloading browsers. Okay, and so you can see it's already reloaded, and now we have console.log running with the new message as proof positive that we have fired a reload from Gulp, and it is continuing to watch us lint, minify, reload. Lint, minify, reload. Okay, so that takes a lot of the seconds that you are waiting for that to reload. It has already started doing that for you, and you don't have to sit there and wait and refresh on your own. Really makes for a great workflow, and it's just something I don't know how to do my job without anymore. I wouldn't want to do my job without those injection tools, the directory watching, and all that stuff. Okay, we've only kind of scratched the surface here. This is what our gulp file ends up looking like at the end of the day here. We're using browser sync, hint, uglify, rename, order, concat. We're using delete. We kind of failed there. That's okay. And obviously SAS is what we started out with. There are so many other things the browser or that Gulp can do for us that we haven't really touched on yet, and a lot of that includes really just anytime you're watching directories for your front end assets for changes. So we didn't really touch on images except very briefly. You saw what that looks like. You can configure any of your tasks to run on changed files only. So what this ends up doing is there's this directory that you may have seen. Actually, I'm not quite sure where it is. It might be in .bin of node modules. I forget. That is, checking to. It might not be created yet, but there's plugins that will watch only newer files for changes. So for example, if you have a large JavaScript project and you don't want to, you only want to lint the code that you've most recently changed. So if you have 40 files and it needs to go through, and this is also true when you're smushing the images. Smush could take a very long time. If you have a large images directory and you make a change to one image, you don't want that to trigger smush to run on every single one of the images if it's already run on those things. So you can configure it to look at newer files only. You can get some notifications about the file sizes before and after. You can inline critical CSS. This is something I wanted to show tonight, and I ran out of. I did not get a chance to actually prepare it, but if anybody gets a chance to have a look at Adi Osmani's critical, what it's doing is measuring the CSS selectors you need for above the fold CSS and injecting that into the head of your document. You might be like, well, I thought I wasn't supposed to put things inside the style tag of the head. And I would say, if it's a savings to your page speed, that's one less blocking resource that your users have to download in order to see a styled page show up. And if it's doing it for you automatically every time you hit save, it's not quite the same as injecting those styles in the head of the document on your own. So you can continue to code inside of main.scss and then have it automatically show up, and that's something I'm really excited about using. Okay, you can remove unused CSS. That's not a thing that we got a chance to touch on, but you can fire a task to look at your project's HTML and go in and peel out CSS that you're not using. This should be something you do on your own, really manicuring CSS and on a regular basis and removing libraries you're not using. But it's nice to have that happen automatically for you by the same token. Okay, you can create sprites, so it can be looking at a directory and automatically combine images together into one resource and then generate the CSS for the background position of each of those images. So you can give yourself sprites just by populating a directory full of images. You can auto-prefix your CSS, okay? So sometimes libraries like Compass will do this for you, but if you'd like it to happen after the fact, then you can have it automatically crawl your CSS and look for CSS3, selectors and rules, and add the vendor prefixes that don't get used by a whole lot of browsers anymore, but that's nice if you're still trying to have compatibility with older browsers and still be able to use CSS3. You can crop and resize images. You can minify SVGs. A lot of SVGs that Adobe Illustrator pumps out are like really verbose, unnecessarily so, and have a lot of metadata. So, this is a way where you can export directly into your project and know that that Gulp task will be watching a SVG directory. If you like writing CoffeeScript, that's not me. I don't know if it's any of you guys, but you can run, you can compile CoffeeScript. You can run your Mocha or your Karma test or any test really that run from the command line. Gulp can fire them, and you can also do stuff like display notification center alerts up here from Gulp saying build's finished. This is minified. Good job. So sorry I went a little bit over, but that is basically all I've got. I don't know if anybody has any questions for me, but I'm always available on Twitter here, and I'm happy to make my slides and everything else available if you go to github.com/TJ Nicolaides and go to my repositories. You got the Gulp demo here. This has basically all the stuff that we were talking about, along with a whole lot of other resources. I got to be honest, nothing here is original as far as material goes. I'm kind of bringing in from all over the place from all these other great tutorials that are a whole lot more detailed than what I gave you tonight. So please make sure that you hit these up and stay active if you want to learn and ask questions and answer other people's questions on Stack Overflow. I find that always helpful.